stay with us.
Representatives Committee on Health to resolve the problems which led to the ongoing strike by the National Association of Resident Doctors. The resident doctors are demanding payment of salaries, arrears of hazard allowances, insurance benefits, as well as domestication of Residency Training Act. The strike by the resident doctors is crippling the country's health sector and continues despite the federal government's threat to invoke the No Work, No Pay provision in the Trade Disputes Act. The union reiterates its demands at this meeting with federal lawmakers. They are also accusing the head of service, the Ministry of Finance and the Budget Office of moving the payment of the doctors from its system GIFMIS to the Integrated Personnel Payroll Information System IPIS for selfish reasons.
Sir, I can assure you and this committee that if we have some certain things I can take back to my members who call off the strike. Some are monetary and some are not monetary. The non-monetary, sir, the House Officers circular, that circular needs to be withdrawn. Why are we having these bottlenecks? Because some people are not doing their jobs. It's a set truth. I'll start with UCH, sir. University College Hospital, UCH, employed doctors under gift mix. The first one was in 2019, October. As it speaks now, people under the gift mix platform in UCH is about 901. Those in the budget office can tell for us. 901. There's a list there. I have a list, sir. I have the madam that have been there since January. I saw the list with Nuru. 900 and something people, you didn't have a waiver. The ones you are saying that got a waiver during the pandemic was not in the pandemic.
The union is also condemning the casualization of resident doctors in government employment and calls for urgent actions to end the practice.
The enemy had made it expressly clear that Nigerian doctors reject casualization of the medical practice and medical doctors. Locum is not acceptable. You want to employ doctors, employ Nigerian doctors appropriately.
We in the Ministry of Health, we do not accede or agree to casualization, quote and unquote, of doctors in any guise.
At the end of interaction, the House Committee on Health sets up a committee to resolve the issues in contention. However, the meeting with the union will continue on Tuesday, August 10th. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Well, that's the first issue we are looking at this morning. Available information for now says, the meeting called by the House of Representatives yesterday to try to stop resident doctors from continuing the strike didn't succeed. Of course, you can see from the report right there. And, the claim of the president of the NARD is, as far as they're concerned, some people are not doing their jobs. More than 100 days after an agreement was signed, and nothing, was really done to solve the problem, so to speak. So I guess we are still in the trenches, so to speak. So here we have this morning with us Wale Smarto-Yerinde, who is Deputy Director and Head Membership Services, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Of course, we all know that NECA provides advice and guidance on the whole gamut of human resources management. Hopefully, he'll be able to give us some insight this morning. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Yerinde.
It was our pleasure. Good morning.
We also have Professor Joseph Anna, who is Lead Senior Fellow, Africa Science for Clinical Governance Research and Patient Safety in Calabar, Nigeria. He is Chairman, NMA Standing Committee on Clinical Governance, as well as former Cross River State Commissioner for Health. Thank you for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you very much, channel, and good morning, Nigerians.
Let me begin with you, Prof. First of all, what do you make of all that's happening so far? First of all, there is the code that doctors swear to, that many people are saying, I mean, should even be the reason why no one, no medical service, no health care provider should even go on strike in the first place. Essential services, we call them. So, what do you make of all that is going on concerning this strike of NARD?
Thank you very much for that question. It's unfortunate that what's going on makes our country look like, quote unquote, a banana republic. It's unfortunate that the health sector is continually dragged into conflict at the expense of the well-being and health and lives of Nigerians. Yes, it is true that we swear an oath as doctors when we graduate that we will do our best for our patients. But that oath also says that to enable us deliver on that requirement, the society will take care of us. I remember as a medical student in University of Nigeria Medical School, Enugu campus, it was constantly drummed into our heads that we are in a profession that is totally committed to the well-being of the patient. But that it doesn't matter where we are in the world, the society takes care of us. And that has been my experience, that once you leave Nigeria, you find that doctors are taken care of. Their welfare is the primary concern of the government, so that doctors can remain, and not just doctors, other health workers can remain in the environment of the health facility and deliver care to fulfill that oath. But it's impossible not for the government not to play its own part and expect that the doctors will stick to that pledge that the oath, that demand that the oath places on them. And I tell you one thing, I have not met any doctor, I've not met any colleague anywhere in the world who wants to go on strike, who wants to abandon his or her patient for 1 minute until that patient is well. It's a calling. It's important that Nigeria begin to realize, as we say in clinical governance, we protect the patients, and our employers need to support us to be able to do that. And those two things must come together. Protecting the patient and supporting the caregiver must be done in tandem. It must come together. If you do one and leave the other, it wouldn't work. So it's a shame that our country has been placed in this kind of situation. They make it look as if it's impossible to have peace in the health system. Of course it's possible to have peace. It's not the Holy Grail. There are ways of doing these things and making sure that as we are protecting the patients in our facilities, we are taken care of. And that way we just stay there. Whether it's one-on-one call or 1 in 4 call, we just stay there. So long as we're taken care of. What is the deal? Why is it? The resident doctors went on strike earlier this year, I think April or March. A number of promises were made. That's not the first time. The last time I asked, I was told some of those promises have been coming since 2013. And this is 2021. That's not fair. That's not right. So the doctors, yes, have taken an oath, but please help us to take care of the patient.
Well, Prof, one of the issues that was raised, well, quite a number of them actually, indicate that the states themselves have a huge role to play in the scheme of things. For instance, item 13 observes with serious concern, the NARD observes with serious concern the poor response of most state governments in domesticating the Medical Residency Training Act of 2017. Of course, some states have domesticated, some have not. Quite a number of states actually have not done that, and that's one of several other issues. The federal government also says that a good number of the issues, as far as they are concerned, are on the purview of the states, are within the purview of the states. You've been health commissioner, so you might be able to speak to why there would be such delays in responding to some of those issues at the state level.
Yes, thanks again for that point. Yes, I served as Commissioner for Health in Cross River State, 2004 to 2008. I served two governors. I served His Excellency Mr. Donald Duke, and I served under His Excellency Senator Leah Limoke. Frankly, sitting from where I am and from my experience, I really can't understand what's happening in the states. I can't understand, because in my state, where I was Commissioner for Health, my bosses gave me attention. They listened. If I take a challenge to them, they listened and they try to do the best they can. So I don't really understand what's happening in any other state, but I know that in Cross River State, when I took challenges, when I took issues to my principals, they did something about it. For instance, let me give you an example. When we introduced clinical governance in 2004, very quickly we started reaping the dividends of quality in healthcare. And we have a university teaching hospital in Calabar, which is a federal institution. And then we have our flagship hospital, which is the General Hospital that belongs to the state. Now, we were doing very well with training, with building capacity, with improving competence and the quality of care. But each time the teaching hospital recruited health workers, doctors, nurses, and so on, the staff who had trained in the state service, of course, will migrate. Who wouldn't migrate when the pay in the teaching hospital was about two times more than what the state was giving them? I took that challenge to my principals, and I said, I have a problem. We've done literally everything we could do. We've covered the 12 pillars of clinical governance. There's one thing left. Please, can you help? What is that? Sir, the take-home pay of my staff is a problem. We train everybody from driver to chief consultant, but each time there is a recruitment in the teaching hospital, which is under federal, my staff, we lose them. So we are forever training new staff. What did they do? In 2 steps, they matched the salaries of the state-employed health workers with that of the federal. That was the state government. And I know that Cross River State has never been one of the richest states in the country, but they did that. This is why I'm saying that I don't understand what's happening in the state, really. I don't see why they cannot do it.
All right, Prof. Let me bring it to Mr. Oyunide here with us. First of all, naturally, this is what you would call industrial relations. What do you make of it in the first place? On the one hand, the law says that essential services officers like doctors, policemen, and all shouldn't have reason to go on strike. Yeah. But we have found that happen. On the other hand, there is the responsibility of the authorities to ensure that that is not even contemplated in the first place.
Well, thank you for having us once again. I think it's an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves, and ordinarily we shouldn't be at this point. Because within the context of industrial relations, I think I also want to view it from 4 other different contexts. The context of the sanctity of agreements, the context of the sanctity of the law, in context of the sanctity of the oath, the Hippocratic oath by the doctors. And you can't deal with one in isolation of the other, especially within the context of the kind of socio-economic environment in which we operate. Now, industrial relations context, the system itself envisaged conflict. The conflict is inherent in whatever kind of relationship that we have, especially in a work environment relationship. So the IR system envisaged there's going to be crisis. And also there are buffers to make sure that those crises are dealt with in such a way that we don't arrive at a point of quagmire, a point of total breakdown of law and order. And one of those parameters that has been put in place to deal with those issues of crisis is regulations and laws. And for us, we have the labor laws, which is the foundation or the basis that regulates relationships at work. And then we have the Trade Dispute Act that also specifies when there are crises, there will always be crises. We can't run away from crisis. When there are crises, when there are disputes, there are also mechanisms that the law has put in place for us to address those crises. And if all parties involved take due diligence and are responsible enough to follow the processes that have been stipulated in the Trade Dispute Act, hardly will you get to the point where you have a total breakdown of law and order as we have, because it stipulates parties must try to settle those issues themselves. If they can't settle, they go to conciliation. If they can't conciliate, they go to arbitration. If the arbitration doesn't work, then the minister can apprehend the dispute. Then the final point is the NIC, National Industrial Court. And then at the National Industrial Court, if they're not satisfied, they can also appeal. So at every point in time, the law provides opportunity for us to dialogue, for us to engage, for us to resolve those issues. And it's now the responsibility of each party involved to make sure that at every point they are responsible enough to work within the parameters of that law. The Prof mentioned the issue of except we are degenerating into a banana republic. If you take the law within the context of us, take the law out of the context of us, then we are probably living in an animal kingdom, which is not palatable to anybody. Then the second context is the context of the sanctity of agreement. And for us, I think what has broken down is not necessarily dialogue. I think what has broken down is trust between government and between the NARD.
What do you think informed that?
I think over time, from trend, you can't rule. NARD is not a trade union; they are an association, but they also operate within an ecosystem. Within an ecosystem that they've probably seen that agreements are breached conveniently. So for them, while negotiating or while signing MOUs, signing agreements, probably it's possible that within the context of their mind, they are looking at, okay, will this agreement will it be honored? Will it not be honored? And if it's not honored, even renegotiating an agreement that has been signed is also permissible. We can sign an agreement, sign an MOU, and if I realize for whatever reason there are circumstances or reasons why I cannot fulfill the terms of the agreement, nothing stops me from calling the other party and say, look, let's renegotiate the agreement that we have agreed, because certain parameters, certain issues that are beyond me or beyond my capacity, beyond my control, as a reason. So it takes a lot of good faith, a lot of trust for us to continue to engage in that. Once trust breaks down, then whatever you say will always be misinterpreted. Well, and that contributed to the point where we are currently.
One of the challenges is that I think maybe could have irked the NARD is the question of timing, because in all of the parameters that you've talked about, you didn't mention time at all. Yeah. I'd want to ask the Prof this as well, but in terms of there seems to be no timeline, so to speak, as to the time within which the agreements should have been met, or at least significant progress made to convince the NARD that, look, we mean well, we intend to follow through in the agreements that we have made to you and all of that. For instance, in their letter, of resuming this strike, which they suspended in April, they said more than 100 days after, 113 days specifically, nothing was done as far as they were concerned. If any needle was being moved, it was probably moving invisibly as far as they were concerned. They weren't seeing any movement. So is there a challenge of timeline that should have been considered in getting this done?
We wouldn't, it would be very dangerous to postulate based on what government is saying or what the NARD is saying without having been part of that process that they are following. Because the government have said conciliation is going on, conversation is going on, meetings are going on. The NARD said, look, the timeline is too long. But expectedly, we expect that basically when the MOU has been signed, there always should be timelines. You cannot sign an agreement that is just open-ended. There always should be timelines, and there always should be measurement of those timelines. Okay, you do this within this period, then we review what you have done, then we move to the next stage of implementation. Now, if there is no timeline, then that creates a lacuna for either party to exploit. If you take out the issue of good faith. With good faith, we don't have to really go into the nitty-gritty of ABC, on the 31st of July, 5 a.m., 5:02 a.m., this must be done, if there's good faith. But once there is that lacuna, then it opens up the opportunity for either party to exploit that. But beyond the issue of...
Do you think that lacuna is being exploited by maybe the government or the NARD?
We wouldn't say so explicitly, but from what we've seen, we are not privy to the agreement, so it becomes dangerous for you to make categorical statements on whether there are timelines or whether somebody is exploiting or not. But for what has broken down is, one, either party has not followed the due process as established by the Trade Dispute Act.
Okay, let me take that. Before you go to other issues, let me ask Prof about that same thing of timeline. More than 100 days after an agreement was signed between government and an association, nothing was done. Well, you've been in government, so perhaps you can educate us on maybe the kind of bureaucratic bottlenecks that could have stalled that kind of progress that we should have made more than 100 days ago.
Well, thank you very much. On the issue of timing, again, I find it very difficult to understand why what is happening. It's happening and keeps happening. If you sign an MOU, before you sign the MOU, before you come to an agreement, on your part, as government, you already knew what you are able to deliver. And once you sign the MOU and the other party has gone back and suspended its industrial action, you prioritize that MOU. If it means sitting in the room and working overnight, you do that and begin to implement the terms of your MOU, because it's a contract, you signed it. And before you signed it, you knew exactly what resources you had. So yes, the MOU must have some timelines. And in fact, I remember that when the strike was suspended earlier this year, some timelines were mentioned. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think timelines were mentioned. So the MOU has timelines. But even if it doesn't have, as government, in my experience, the moment you signed an MOU like that to avert a crisis or to solve a crisis, you prioritize that. It comes up to the top of the priority. And you begin to discuss how you're going to implement what you have promised. And as Ms. Onyerinde rightly said, if for one reason or the other, maybe the economic situation has changed a bit, or for whatever reason, you find that you are not able to deliver within that timeline, and the other party is giving you signals that its members are becoming restive, they might go out of strike again. Surely you try and do something about it. Because
we're about to take a break now. Just 1 second. Just 1 second, Prof. Are you suggesting that government has not prioritized this agreement?
I would like to believe that they are prioritized, but if they have, what is the outcome?
Okay, we'll take a short break. Just 1 second, Prof. We'll take a short break now to take some messages, and we'll resume this conversation afterwards. Please stay with us. Well, this doctor's strike is an issue we're still taking a look at. The federal government is still finding ways to have an agreement with the NARD, and we're having a conversation around how that can be done. Makwe has a few questions as well. Makwe.
Thank you, Ayo. Let me start with Professor Anna. He did say that he wants to believe that government prioritized the agreement which was signed with the doctors. In fact, the agreement was called a memorandum of action, not even just of understanding. And much as the reports we just highlighted now raises, very ethical questions about the use, excuse me, of strike actions by doctors. I do not know what your reading has been of government's response. When this notice of strike came up, I do not know if you were able to see what the reaction of government was, and if that would have been a reaction that you would have recommended on the part of government.
Thank you, Mark. I don't know which of the reactions you are referring to. I recall that when the strike started, I think for the first day or two, there was hardly any reaction. And then eventually the reaction came, and I don't think it's the best reaction, really, considering that government hasn't kept its own part of the bargain, which is why the strike is happening again. I would have thought that the first reaction would have been to call in the NARD, and if you have challenges, explain the challenges to them. As I said, I would like to believe government has prioritized this matter, because it's life and death we're talking about here. We're talking about lives. What can be more important than that? Today we're okay, we're healthy, we're talking to you on the television. Who knows what will happen in the next hour, tomorrow, the day after? And by the way, illness doesn't select. It just happens to anybody. We're all mortal, it's going to happen. So it has to be prioritized. And if they've prioritized it, what is the challenge? What is stopping the action? You say it's memorandum of action. What is stopping the action, the implementation? Maybe that's where the question we should be answering. What is stopping the action? What is stopping the implementation of agreements that are arrived at freely? What is stopping it?
So, Prof, we want to believe that you wear, two hats. You're a doctor, you've also worked in government, and if anybody will understand just how slowly bureaucracy works in government, you will. But you also are raising questions as to what actions are being carried out. Now, when you talked about the fact that there was no reaction in the first 2 days or so, on the part of government, there were huge questions about that. I think for a number of people, that's where concerns started coming up. And then when we did get one, it was that the doctors should go back to work, and that there was a legal judgment of some sort declaring their own strike action illegal. And we had the Minister of Labour saying that doctors should go back to work, otherwise he will invoke the no work, no pay rule. So it does raise huge questions as to whether or not government indeed considered the agreement which they signed a priority. Because assuming they did, would we have seen the sort of reaction or lack of it which we saw?
That's exactly my point. And my experience, if I go back to my personal experience, when I was in government, we couldn't possibly sign a memorandum of action or whatever I want to call it and not deliver on it. We don't go to sleep. We work on it and make sure we deliver on our pledge, on our promise. We implement it because we know that if we don't, we're going to go back to square one. And it's not in the interest of anybody for the health system to literally grind to a halt. Ever so often, we're actually a laughing stock outside in the rest of the world. They're wondering what is happening to us, especially when our doctors, our other health workers go elsewhere and deliver and shine. So why can't we be allowed to deliver within our country?
What is the problem? Then could be responsible for the lethargy which we seem to be noticing on the part of government officials? I don't know. Do you think that this is because you talked about how you will take this to your bosses and, you know, it gets attended to? Do you think that they are not getting the cooperation, as the ministers now, are not getting the cooperation which they seek at the highest level? Or is it that we are so overwhelmed? Don't forget that it will also demand resources being appropriated and also cash backed. Do you think that there is, bottlenecks in terms of getting what has been appropriated for these doctors to the ministry? I don't know. Are you able to? I don't know if you've been able to speak or have backroom conversations. Something that could possibly explain the seeming lethargy which we seem to notice on the part of government.
Yes, the government is not. It's not demonstrating to Nigerians, not demonstrating to us that it's taking the issue of our health very seriously, because no matter how many discussions are going on behind the scenes, until something actually happens, those discussions don't matter to anybody. Patients are roaming the streets looking for care to take. They get to hospital and they can't get the care. The doctors, the caregivers are complaining that apart from the fact that there are no equipment, there is no running water, there is no lights, there's no that, they're also not paid for the work that they have put in month after month. So I don't know what challenges our colleagues who are ministers today are facing, but frankly, I think that's where what Nigerians need to be asking. What is stopping? Well, we've read in one or two papers about head of service and Ministry of Finance. And is that where the blockage is? Is it that the Ministry of Health decides to do something, and when it goes to Ministry of Finance says, oh, we don't have the money? So where was Ministry of Finance when the memorandum of action was signed? Was there no discussion within government about how to do it? As I said, in my experience, once we agreed that we are going to do X, we did it. Because we would have done our homework before we put our pen on paper signature, so that our word will count, our signatures will count, so that we have the trust of the people we have sent out to manage patients. And by the way, I repeat, today we're not patients, tomorrow we're going to be patients. Is that what those in Ministry of Finance, I don't know if that's what the problem is, but if that's what the problem is, are they not human beings as well? Don't they understand what it means for us to be alive? So I don't know what the problem is, but whatever it is, government needs to show that it has prioritized health as important. If the resources are down for one reason or the other, then you can revise the agreement by inviting the other party before they walk out on strike again. Because I tell you, and I repeat, I have not met one colleague, one doctor anywhere, within Nigeria, outside Nigeria, who is ready, who wants to go on strike. I've not met one in how many years of practice. So the question is, what is stopping the Ministry of Health implementing agreements after they've signed it? That's what the question should be.
It is interesting that you've made reference to the breakdown of trust. So let me come to Mr. Wale Smart Onyeride, who also made reference to that it's not a breakdown of dialogue, it's a breakdown of trust. Before now, we had seen the House of Representatives wade into this matter. On a number of occasions, the association, that's NARD, has called off or suspended its strike action on the intervention of the House of Representatives. And we even saw yesterday the Chairman House Committee on Health talking about insincerity on the part of government. Nonetheless, they're back at it, you know, facilitating dialogue between NARD and government on the other hand. Now, I'm wondering, how optimistic, because yesterday we understand that the meeting didn't yield much. It was still a stalemate. They're going to continue meeting today. What would it take to build back the trust? Considering that this is not the first meeting, it is as a result of the agreement signed through meetings like this, which have not been honored, is the reason why the NARD is back on strike. What do you think it will take to reassure the doctors that whatever is in the pipeline is already about to come out of it? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you. I think, you know, trust is something once broken, then it takes twice the effort to build it, to rebuild. And in this case, in this particular case, I think one thing that government can do, and also the doctors, is both parties to show some level of responsibility. What we preach in our association, in NECA, is responsible enterprises. So whether the enterprise is private, whether it's government, you know, the imperative for responsible enterprises cannot be overemphasized. Now, an MOA, Memorandum of Action, has been signed. I think one of the things that government can do, and fundamentally before you sign an agreement, Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Action, whatever you call it, there should always be a mandate that whatever we are signing, we have the mandate of either the employers or either government to sign, because we have the capacity to implement. And I also mentioned earlier, for whatever reason, if we cannot implement after signing, for whatever reason, also we have the due diligence, we have the responsibility to call the other party to the same table where we negotiated and say, look, for certain reasons, we are facing these challenges, we cannot implement this, but we'll implement this, and also setting timelines for the implementation of all those. So one of the things to build trust, because whether we agree or not, you know, we cannot all work outside the context of the law. That is
the agreement.
Yes, we cannot work outside the context of the law.
Assuming for whatever reason there are parts of the agreement. I don't know if you can hear me now. Assuming for whatever reason there are parts of the agreement which they are finding very difficult to implement as we speak, for whatever reason, will it be too late to say that now? Or do you think that this trust is broken down way too badly for government to now say, hey, look, as a result of what has happened in the past, or whatever reason, we're going to find it difficult to implement A and B? Is it too late in the day to say that?
It's not too late. It's never too late in negotiation, because the relationship continues. You know, whether they go to court, whether they come back from court, the employer-employee relationship still continues. So it's never too late. So if there are reasons why those agreements cannot be implemented, the government, that is the employer now, and NARD will still have to come back to the table. You know, the unfortunate thing is this, and where is so unfortunate is this. No matter how far we go, no matter the crisis, no matter the grandstanding by both parties, and as you are aware, as both parties are taking positions, you know, patients are dying in the hospitals. The NARD, they are violating the Hippocratic oath, and government is also not living to its responsibility of meeting those agreements that it has signed. Those things have consequences, far-reaching consequences for the long-term relationship. But whether they go to court, whatever happens, both parties will still have to come back to the table to either implement or renegotiate those terms of that agreement. So the trust can still be rebuilt. It's never too late to rebuild that trust. And as I said, it's an employer-employee relationship. The relationship continues into far into the future. So government can call them back. And one of the things we should have done, if you permit me, is this. And one of the things NARD should have done, one of the things we should have done before now is what we are doing now. Reaching out to critical stakeholders like the House of Rep has done.
The House of Reps has always intervened in this matter. That's what Markwe opened with the other time. The House of Reps has intervened even before the strike was suspended in the first place. In fact, it was the instrumentality of the intervention of the House of Representatives that saw to them suspending the strike in the first place. And then a memorandum of action was called by government, was signed with government, and we're where we are now. But in fostering this trust and this communication that you talked about the other time, the Minister of Labor and Productivity, for instance, who is supposed to be the conciliar, has also come out to say, look, if you guys don't go back to work, I'm going to invoke the no work, no pay policy. Is it time for that, or is it too early?
Well, the Minister of Labor's position is a bit complex, because is the Minister of Labor ordinarily is to be the one midwifing the crisis, finding a way, and also is representing the employers, government. So his position is dual, and with both having two-edged swords. So for government, I think we cannot still run away from the issue of coming back to that agreement that was signed. The minister has enormous powers, as conferred on him by law, to invoke whatever provision of the law to make sure that both parties come to the table. If the minister is not directly involved, now the minister is representing the employers and invoking the provisions of the law to the letter will always be seen, be perceived as an attempt to coerce or an attempt to incapacitate the other party. So his position is quite difficult. That notwithstanding, I said we cannot work we cannot take the whole context outside the provisions of the law. And the law has given provisions, has given mechanisms for us to deal with it. So we will suggest this. We'll come back to the negotiating table. If there are reasons, for whatever reasons government cannot meet A, B, and C, then we'll come back to the issue of good faith. Let government be open enough to say, look, A, B, C, D, we cannot deal with now. We'll deal with later. And NARC also, I think it's very important we mention this. And the crisis, as I mentioned, goes beyond the issue of the strike. It goes to the fabrics. It eats the fabrics of our society, the fabrics of who we are, when life itself has lost value. Because if life has not lost value, then government will treat essential services as being essential, and NARC will treat the oath as being very fundamental to their practice.
Okay. Well, let me just take the closing comments of Professor Joseph Anah on this issue. What would be your parting shot, so to speak, your candid counsel to maybe government or NARD, if you can do that within the shortest possible time?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to say that we must realize, like other governments around the world have realized, that when the Hippocratic Oath was crafted, it was crafted with the proviso that the health workers, the doctors, will be taken care of. And under that, they will now deliver the best possible care that they can deliver. Secondly, I want to say to government, no work, no pay. I mean, the last time I checked, I don't think the fire service will recommend that instead of putting out a fire, you pour petrol onto the fire. There is a memorandum of action. Government, if you have a challenge, because they haven't told us they have a challenge with implementing it, or maybe I'm not aware of that, but if they have a challenge with implementing what they signed in March or April, then call the upper party to the table. There are doctors, and I've said before, I've not met one doctor who wants to be on strike. Every doctor wants to be in the beat, attending to patients. So government, call NARD, if you have challenges, let them know what the challenges are, and let them know.
Okay.
But don't allow doctors to go on strike in the first place, and then you start throwing threats around. It doesn't work.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for your counsel this morning, and let's just hope that everyone who needs to is listening. Professor Joseph Anna is Lead Senior Fellow, Africa Center for Clinical Governance Research and Patient Safety in Calabar, as well as Chairman, NMA Standing Committee on Clinical Governance. He was also Cross River State Commissioner for Health. We've also had Mr. Wale Smarto Yorinde, Deputy Director and Head Membership Services, NECA. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Our pleasure.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So, Sunrise Daily continues with something related after now.